Hello, the world. This is They Will Kill, a true crime podcast. I am Courtney-Eck.
And I'm Sadie-Eck.
And I'm coming to you from Finches right outside my door. 4th of July right outside my door. Also, rain is about to start raining on my metal roof. So, yeah, audio quality. So, forgive us in advance if it sounds like I am under siege, because I am.
Aren't we all?
It's a metaphor for yes. Good point, Sadie. Good point. So just enjoy the auditory metaphor for life right now as we tell you some kind of terrible tale. What is the terrible tale tonight, Sadie?
It's a terrible one. It's really, really terrible.
I mean, aren't they all?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yes.
especially lately.
I know.
We've been on a roll.
Well, this is the double family annihilator, George Jefferson Hassell.
Oh, God, no. Double.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yep. And it's an old-timey one, but it's a very interesting old-timey one.
Great.
I want to give a quick shout out to Delaney Bartlett, who goes by the Murder Nerd, who put together a very nice blog post about the case that I relied on to help me put the story together. You can find her channel on YouTube as well. And this was a listener suggestion, and just as per usual, I didn't write down who suggested it. I don't know what is wrong with me. But thank you.
It's just one of those things. It's one of those ex-sister traits. It's like going from the Instagram DMs to the notes or what. I don't know. I don't know why we can't do it. We can't do it.
Well, and I often, when somebody suggests something, I look it up on my phone to see if it's been covered a lot. And that's sort of like my first criteria. And then if it hasn't and it's interesting, I just keep it like a tab open on my phone. And so when I did that, I was like, ooh, this is a really good one. I want to do it quickly. And then I didn't. So yeah, anyway, I just didn't write it down. So
we apologize.
Yes.
We love you and keep them coming.
Yes.
We appreciate them.
So in the first few weeks of December 1927, 38-year-old George Hassell invited the town of Farwell, Texas, to his estate sale. He said his wife Susie and 8 of her 9 children, 21-year-old Alton, 15-year-old Virgil, 13-year-old Maudie, 11-year-old Russell, 7-year-old David, 6-year-old Johnny, 4-year-old Nanny Martha, and 22-year-old Samuel had gone ahead to Blair, Oklahoma to live with family while he stayed behind and sold off their belongings to fund the move.
Oh boy, no way.
So many children.
Crazy. That is crazy. With quick side note, the best names for ever. Like
so, and Nanny Martha, like please.
Nanny Martha, get out of here with Nanny Martha.
No.
That is very overwhelming. That is a lot of children.
Yes. As friends and neighbors arrived at the sale, they were just as curious about what was for sale as they were about how it was possible that the very large family had left so quickly and without saying goodbye to anyone.
Yeah, great question, Town.
Hassell explained that it had been a last-minute decision and there just wasn't time for goodbyes. I thought a lot about, we have a 97-year-old grandmother who's still living. Mm-hmm. She was born in 25, I think. And I thought about her a lot when writing the story because of the stories that she told of her childhood and like telephones, and everybody knew everybody's business at all times. Right?
They would like listen in on each other's phone calls.
Yes.
And stuff.
Yeah. She was just telling me the other day that she was best friends with the phone operator and the librarian, and between the two of them, and she worked for the post office. So the three of them like knew everybody's business at all time.
Yeah.
And so I think about that a lot with the story. Yeah. Like, of course, the whole town was coming. It was probably like 35 people came to the estate sale and was like, where did half of our town go?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So George and Susie had moved to Farwell just 2 years before and were described as night and day. Hassell was a large man in all ways. His body was as large as his personality. He was also known to be a heavy drinker, have a, quote, eye for the ladies, and a terrible temper. Mm-hmm. Susie, on the other hand, was described as, quote, a devout Christian who read her Bible daily.
Yep.
Susie had been married to Hassell's brother, Thomas, and the two had 8 children together.
Wow.
When Thomas passed away after a mule kicked him to death, Susie, who was pregnant with their 9th child, contacted Hassell and asked him to come help, quote, bring the crops in.
I think that happened a lot back then.
Yes. Yeah, I think
even our own grandmother, like, knew our grandfather's previous, was like best friends with our grandfather's previous wife.
Yeah, nursed her through her cancer.
Yeah, and then sort of just married our grandfather to help him with the kids, and bingo bango, Sadie and I exist.
Right. Yeah, 100%. I think that definitely it was a brother's duty in some way, you know, like if he was unmarried to marry his brother's wife.
Wild.
Yeah. I don't know why my dogs are barking.
Under siege. We're under siege.
So Hassell agreed, and 4 months after Thomas died, Hassell and Susie got married.
Wow.
Soon after the wedding, Susie gave birth to her youngest child, Samuel, and Hassell moved them all to Texas and rented a farmhouse.
Was the youngest, not that it matters, was the youngest child the previous husband's progeny?
Yeah, so she was pregnant at the time of Thomas's death, and then they got married so quickly that by the time they were married, she gave birth, but it was Thomas. As far as I can tell, some of these details, you know, are a little fuzzy. There was also like one article I read that said that Hassell was in the field with his brother Thomas when he got like kicked to death by a mule. But I couldn't corroborate that one. And I don't think that's true because the other articles I read didn't. He was summoned to. Yeah. So anyway, I don't think that's true. But it's yeah. And I'm pretty sure that Susie gave birth to Thomas's last child after he died.
Yep.
So as people gathered for the sale, they couldn't help but notice that it seemed as if all the family's belongings were still there. Clothes for all the children and Susie's Bible, which she treasured, was among the items being sold.
Also, you probably had 5 things. Everyone had 5 things. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When one of the neighbors' wagons went through the backyard during the sale and it got stuck in newly dug dirt, Hassell was quick to tell everyone that despite the fact that he was getting ready to move out of state, he had just built a new root cellar at his rented farmhouse.
Likely story.
Mm-hmm. After the sale, Hassell prepared to leave. His landlord rented the farmhouse to new tenants who started to move in. Hassell told them he was almost ready to leave, but needed to clean one more room. They found him with all of his belongings stacked up against the wall, scrubbing the floor of the room. After he was done cleaning, he still didn't leave, and the new tenants ended up letting him stay for a few days. One night after dinner, Hassell said he wasn't feeling well and went to his room. A few minutes later, he called out to the new tenants and asked them to call the doctor and the police. They found Hassell laying in his bed in a pool of his own blood. What? It turned out Hassell had stabbed himself 3 times in the abdomen and had to be rushed to the hospital for surgery.
What?
While Hassell was in the hospital, he was said to be in a decent mood, laughing with the hospital staff. When authorities tried to send Susie a telegram to let her know what had happened, they were told that Susie wasn't in the small Oklahoma town. This raised the suspicions of police who decided to search the farmhouse. In Hassell's room behind the boxes, stacked against the wall, they found blood splatter. So they decided to search the property and quickly came across the new root cellar. When they dug up the newly disturbed land, they found Susie and 8 of her 9 children buried in a shallow grave.
Oh, God.
Their bodies having been carefully arranged. They were wrapped in blankets, were all in their night clothes, and under Susie's body, police found an axe.
That's rough.
Yep. So just a trigger warning for graphic details. An examination of the family showed that Susie had been severely beaten. Her face and skull had been crushed. Fuck. The 2 oldest boys, Alton and Virgil, had been shot with a shotgun. Russell, the 3rd oldest boy, had his skull crushed, and all the victims, except for Alton, had stockings tied around their necks.
Wow.
When police confronted Hassell, he immediately confessed, saying, "I did it. I did it." He would later tell authorities that on the night of December 5th, he'd been drinking, and he and Susie got into a fight. She accused Hassell of sexually abusing his 13-year-old niece or stepdaughter, Maddie.
Oh, no. Oh, God.
The newspapers at the time called what he did an affair.
Oh, God. People, come on.
And said, Hassell said in his sworn confession, quote, "It was plain enough to see that she was in a family way, all right."
Oh, my God.
Although Hassell never admitted to raping Maddie, it was clear that she was pregnant at the time of her murder. During the argument, Hassell left the house and drank a pint of whiskey, and then he went back inside where he and Susie continued to fight. He got so angry that he picked up a ball-peen hammer that Susie kept on her bedside table and hit her in the face with it twice. He then strangled her, and when he realized that she was still alive, he tightly wrapped a stocking around her neck and then hit her in the head with an axe.
Oh, my God. Well, I was going to say earlier, like, imagine being the police who found the scene and how horrible it would have been. But then I was like, I think it might have been a little more common for things like this to happen than I would initially think, you know? It's just,
Yeah.
it was a wild times, man.
Right.
Nobody, like, men could kind of do whatever the fuck they wanted.
Yep. Yeah, it was real easy to just sort of go away, you know, like just become somebody else.
Yeah, and also be really horrible to your families.
Yep.
Both of our grandmothers have all kinds of horrible stories about their lives as young girls.
Yep. So Hassell told police, quote, "I hit her twice before I could stop myself, and then I shut her wind off with my hand to keep the sound in." Oof. And then all blood commenced running everywhere.
Oh, man, that is not a good way to say that, dude.
No, it's the worst way to say anything ever.
That's a very passive way to say it, too. Like, you didn't have anything to do with it. It's just the blood. That's just what blood does.
Yes.
No, bro, blood stays in bodies. It does not commence running everywhere.
No. Yeah, it was a lot of that. Like, his whole confession was just like, well, and then I just had to because, well, yeah, no, you didn't. No, you fucking didn't.
Nope.
So once he realized what he had done, he decided he had no other choice but to kill all of the children as well. He started with the baby, not yet 2 years old, who was sleeping in the same room where his mother was murdered. Hassell strangled Samuel with a stocking. He then went to each of the youngest children, moving up in age, doing the same to them.
God, why? There's no reason. None whatsoever.
No, he could have just left.
He's very easily. What are they going to do?
Right.
Nothing.
Nope.
Get on a pony and come find you?
Right.
No.
When he got to 11-year-old Russell, the young boy woke up and started to fight for his life. The struggle woke his brother, 15-year-old Virgil, who joined the fight. Hassell said Virgil even managed to grab a brick and hit Hassell with it a number of times. But in the end, Hassell was able to get his shotgun and shoot Virgil. Russell almost managed to escape, but Hassell caught up with the boy and choked him until he was unconscious and then hit him in the head with an axe as well.
God, what a horror show.
No. He then strangled pregnant Maddie, the one he'd been accused of raping. Over the next few days, Hassell worked at digging the mass grave and cleaning up the crime scene. Unfortunately, his killing spree was not over, and Susie's oldest boy, Alton, had been out of town working when his family was murdered and wouldn't return for a few days.
God.
Instead of fleeing, Hassell waited 5 days for him to come home. When Alton finally arrived, Hassell told the young man that his mom and siblings had left for a few days to visit family in Oklahoma. Hassell and Alton slaughtered a chicken for dinner that night and then played cards until Alton went to bed.
Oh my God, this guy sucks.
With a capital S.
Is after something no good.
Terrible. After Alton went to sleep, Hassell drank whiskey and then put a shotgun to Alton's head and pulled the trigger.
What the fuck?
Hassell told police the initial killing was in a moment of passion, and then he couldn't stop. The blood later found behind the suitcases was Alton's. The only child of Susie's to survive was her oldest daughter, Nora, who lived with her husband in another state. She was supposed to visit her family at the time of the murders, but had been delayed and hadn't been able to make it.
God, what on earth? My God, being that girl, having to deal with...
No, absolutely no. Not okay. I cannot imagine.
So many people.
The town of Farwell was horrified by Hassell's confession. He had to be transported from one jail to another in the middle of the night to avoid the angry mobs that were after him.
I bet.
Right?
Can you imagine?
No. While Hassell was in jail, he told authorities he wasn't done talking and had more crimes to confess to. He then shocked police by telling them he had killed another family in California.
Oh my God.
He went on to say that 10 years prior, he had killed his common-law wife and her 3 children.
Wow.
He refused to give them any identifying details and just left it at that, saying, quote, "It was a good job and no one will ever know."
Ugh. Dude.
Yeah, right?
What are you doing?
Terrible things. Texas authorities contacted California law enforcement to see if they had any unsolved quadruple murders, but they had nothing that matched. Luckily, Hassell's story had made national news, and when it broke that he had confessed to killing another family in California, a woman in Pennsylvania saw the story in the paper, including a picture of Hassell, and thought he looked familiar.
No way.
Yes. It turned out that she visited her sister, Marie Vogel, 10 years earlier in California, where she was living with her new husband and 3 children on a farm.
I didn't even know national news was a thing back then.
Right?
I mean, of course it is, because there were wars and stuff and people knew about it, but still, that's wild.
Yes. Yep.
How did that work?
Yeah.
Wow.
Telegrams. Ponies.
Yeah, seriously. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. A short time after her visit, Marie stopped responding to her letters, and when she got in touch with George, he told her that Marie and her kids had moved to Australia.
Uh-huh.
She contacted Texas authorities and told them her story. They then got in touch with Whittier police, who were able to find documents that showed that Hassell and Marie Vogel had lived together on a farm in California. When police interviewed neighbors that had lived next door to them, they said that Hassell had told them that Marie and her kids had moved to San Francisco. They also saw Hassell bring a large trunk into his garage and then several other small bundles.
Mm.
He then worked inside the garage for 3 days, digging up the dirt floor.
God.
The neighbors saw him, quote, crawl under the house, throwing out dirt and rubbish.
Also, lived on a farm in Whittier is such a funny sentence, because that's where my college girlfriend's from, and so I spent a lot of time in Whittier, and there are no farms in Whittier
No,
anymore.
I thought of that too. Yeah,
That's nuts.
It's a totally, yeah, could you imagine?
No. I mean, it was all farmland back then, but still, that's funny to think about.
In the following days, they could smell the fumes. Oh, this is still the neighbors talking. So in the following days, they could smell the fumes of burning rags coming from his kitchen. And I'm not sure what that is all about, but I assume he was just destroying evidence. A few months passed with Hassell living in the house alone until one day he showed up with a new woman and young child. He told the neighbors that the woman was his housekeeper. He moved out soon after and left the woman to clean up the house and get it ready for the next tenant.
Mm-hmm.
When police in Texas told Hassell what they had learned back in California, Hassell decided to give them a full confession. Because of course he did.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
He said that Marie had believed in, quote, spiritualism and had visions of treasure buried under the garage. According to Hassell, she made him dig up the dirt floor to look for the treasure, but nothing was found. After he killed Marie and her children, he buried them in the, quote, treasure hole, is what he called it.
What the fuck?
No. When asked why he did it, he said he just suddenly lost his temper with Marie and hit her over the head with a club. He then choked her to death, first with his hands and then with a rope. And the guy's got an MO. It's disgusting.
Yeah, obviously it's just a serial killer that's lazy, just
kills whoever's closest.
Yes, murders of convenience. It's
Yes.
Clearly he's wants to kill people, and then he just looks over and he's like, oh, there's some people.
Right.
There's 9 of them living in my house. I'll just kill all of them right now.
Yep.
Ugh.
So once Marie was dead, he went room to room and killed her 3 children, ages 8, 3, and 1.
Babies. Babies.
The house had been torn down in the years after Hassell lived there, so he had to draw a map of the property showing authorities where he had buried the 4 bodies. Following his map, police were able to dig up the remains of Marie and her children. They each had their skulls crushed, and a rope was found around each of their necks.
Yeah, so senseless. There's no reason to kill 3 little tiny baby children, none other than you want to.
Right. So Hassell was ultimately charged with 13 murders and pleaded guilty to them all and asked for the death sentence.
Wow, he already stabbed his own self in the stomach 3
Right.
times,
But, like,
which is so strange.
It is so strange. It all just feels like such a show.
Yeah, right?
Yep, he just was tired, so he's like, oh, well, I want to be the center of attention now.
Yeah, it's so specific, because stomach stabs are the worst, as far as I've heard, like the most painful, but also takes a really long time to die, and I don't know.
Well, and the fact that
whether or not he had that information, that's just such a weird thing to do.
Right, and he stabbed himself and then immediately called out for help. Like, it just doesn't seem like he really truly wanted to die. Right, he just, for whatever reason, he was tired of
having some kind of attack.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's very creepy. It's
Yes.
really creepy, regardless.
Yes. While he sat in jail waiting for his sentencing trial, he was said to be very happy-go-lucky and enjoyed being in the limelight. Quote, he was portrayed as a morbid celebrity who loved to chat with the children who flocked to his first-floor jail cell. Like, who is letting their kids go to this mass murderers
Listen,
cell?
I think that back in the day when you didn't have a whole lot to do, like, that was entertainment.
Yeah.
Like,
so
come see the
creepy.
freak show, come see the mass murdering dad guy in
Yeah.
the jail, in the exterior jail thing in Texas.
Ugh, I hate it.
Yep.
He gave many interviews where he shared his life story.
Yeah.
So Hassell was born on July 5th, 1888 in Smithville, Texas. He and his family moved to Oklahoma when he was a toddler, and when he was just 13 years old, he said his abusive father beat his mother to death.
Whoa. Wow. Well, there's your fucking route to your very specific brand of serial killing.
Yes, and this is one of those stories, again, that some articles mentioned, others didn't, so I'm not exactly sure, but I believe it. I believe that this is probably where he came from.
Yeah. Yeah, that really tracks. That really
Yes.
paints a clear picture of what happened in his brain.
Right.
Yep.
So George ran away from home after that, and it's not clear if his father was convicted for his mother's murder, but I don't believe so.
Right.
And Hassell became a drifter. He struggled to hold on to jobs because he would steal from his employers, so he moved from place to place. He said his father was then poisoned by his stepmother and died when he was 15 years old.
Well.
Yep. After his father was killed, Hassell said, quote, that was my first impulse to commit a crime. I went out to the place to kill the whole bunch of them, but I got too much whiskey and didn't use any gun.
Wow.
According to newspapers at the time, Hassell's stepmother died a short time later after accidentally drinking poison. Hassell was never charged with her death. Seems like quite a coincidence.
Yeah, I'll say.
I mean, but she did. If she did poison Hassell's dad, then she might have just had some accidental drinking poison.
Poisoned her own self.
Laying around.
I would imagine you have lots of poison for real. Like,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Whip up a cocktail for somebody else and then set it aside and forget and then wake up. It's like when you fall asleep in your 20s with like vodka sitting on your nightstand and then
it's water.
Yep. She pulled one of those.
Yeah. So after this, he, quote, fell in with a bad crowd and was arrested for embezzling some money and spent 2 years in jail. At 18, he married his first wife and they had a baby together. It's said that he never met his son and only ever saw him from a distance.
Oh, thank God.
Right?
Good for that kid, yes.
When Hassell moved to Oklahoma for work, his wife and infant stayed in Texas. Hassell said that he was deeply in love with his first wife, but soon after he moved, she sent him a letter saying that she was done with him and the marriage was over.
I would say that's route number 3.
Yes. Quote, we promised to write every day when we parted, Hassell said. I wrote, but a week passed before I heard from my wife. Then I received a letter. It stated she was through with me. That ruined my life.
Yep. So I just started killing all of my families moving
Right?
forward.
Exactly.
Yep.
And also, I'm sure he was terrible to her. I couldn't find any details, but you don't just leave your husband with your infant son because he went to work, right? Like,
No.
she was like, okay, goodbye. Goodbye.
Yeah. Now's my chance. I'm out.
After the divorce, he joined the army, but only 9 months later deserted to join the Navy under an assumed name.
Oh, I was like, is that a thing? Yeah, I guess if you change your name real quick.
And then he deserted the Navy and went back to Texas to see his ex-wife, but she refused to see him. So then he went back to California and tried to join the army again. Like,
dude,
what is happening?
Get a trade or something.
Or, yeah, right? Like, if you desert the army one time, you don't desert it 2 more times after that.
Right. And also, what and why the Navy over the Army anyway?
So this time, military authorities figured out who Hassell was, and he was arrested for desertion.
Good.
He would spend 2 years in military prison.
Once he needs to get it together.
Yes. Once he was out of prison, he continued to try to reconnect with his ex-wife, but she refused to speak to him. He even married another woman because she had a child that reminded him of the son he had with his first wife.
Mm-hmm.
He said later that he finally gave up on his true love after he tried to visit, but his son was there and had thrown rocks at him. So in 1915, a Sacramento Union newspaper story reported that Hassell, along with Marie Vogel, the first wife he murdered, and an unidentified man, were being sought by Chicago police for killing a man during a card game.
What?
Hassell was identified as the killer, but there was no follow-up to the story and no reports that Hassell ever was arrested or charged in connection with the Chicago murder. Once Hassell and Marie, who had one child before meeting Hassell, got to Whittier, they decided to adopt 2 more children. This would be the family that Hassell would decide to annihilate a short time later. In total, Hassell was married 5 times, but said he only loved his first wife. Susie was his 5th wife, and said he only married her out of obligation to his brother.
That is so much stuff. There's so many events.
He was 38 years old when he was finally arrested.
That is a lot.
Yes.
Like, really a lot.
Yes. And like this idea, and I'm not sure what adopt means really, because he and Marie weren't legally married. They were, common law. But like, you don't take in 2 children on top of the one you already have. And the relationship, I'm gather, was not very long. Like he just wanted to kill.
Yeah. Yep.
He wanted to,
and I'm sure it was some sort of like farm scenario or something. When they got those 2 kids in Whittier, it was probably like, we can't keep them, and they were like, they can help us out, or who knows,
right?
But yes, yeah, he was very happy to have them to take their lives, I'm sure.
Yep. In the lead up to trial, Hassell was seen by multiple psychiatrists who decided he was a sociopath.
No, wow, big fucking shock there, buddies.
Hassell went to trial on January 26, 1927. Even though he had already pleaded guilty, the jury was to determine if he was sane at the time of his crimes. The prosecution started by reading Hassell's written confession. The defense didn't have much to say and really just tried to get the judge to declare a mistrial because of the pre-trial publicity. You're like, maybe we shouldn't do this. I don't know. So after just 2 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than an hour before coming back with the recommendation that Hassell be sentenced to death in the electric chair.
No big surprise.
The judge agreed and originally sentenced Hassell to die just 30 days after being found guilty.
Wow.
Yes. When the judge handed down this sentence, Hassell said, quote, "Thank you, Your Honor." California declined to try Hassell for the murder of Marie and her children, since she was already sentenced to death in Texas. He was already sentenced to death in Texas. Hassell's execution was pushed off by more than a year due to his case going through the appeals process. He would later tell reporters that his time in prison was the happiest of his life. Quote, "He was described as a model prisoner, always cheerful and cracking jokes. He wove doilies as a gift to visitors, fellow inmates, and even the members of the jury who sent him to death row.
What is that? What is that, like, pathology? What is going on with this guy? He's all over the place. He is a real live creeper.
Real life creeper.
And, like, did he just want somebody to, like, take care of him and keep him in line? You know, like, wow. I would really love to get all up in that little weirdo brain.
Right? I agree.
It's weird. That is some weird shit.
Yeah, I couldn't find a lot about what the psychologists that he met with said, other than they decided he was a sociopath. But, yeah, like, what does this all mean? It's very strange. When one reporter asked him why he committed the murders, Hassell said he didn't know. He then pointed to his head and said that, quote, something was wrong up here.
I was just going to say, I wonder if he, kind of like a Ed Kemper.
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
You know, clearly, I mean, he wanted to die. He kind of weirdly tried to kill himself, but also was like, I'm not going to stop doing this. My compulsion to do this is there. And but had that self-awareness. And so, like, once he was in prison, knowing he was going to die, he probably was like, great, I can just have a good old time.
Yeah, I can
make
knit
doilies,
my doilies. Yeah.
Make some friends. Yeah. Chat with kids on the whatever.
So creepy. But yeah, I thought the same thing. He, just Ed Kemper-ish.
Yeah. And I imagine that's probably more common than not. You know, I would imagine that people who become serial killers or just like pathological hurters of other people, I would imagine that they were so hurt, you know, most often that they became those people, and they probably don't want to be doing the things that they're doing. It's just a pathology that they cannot control. So I think if they're being honest or vulnerable, I think that they don't want to be doing those things, even though they can't help themselves. You know?
Yeah, and it's a relief when they're finally forced to stop.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. At one point, Hassell was sent to the death chamber, only for his execution to be temporarily stayed by the governor, so Hassell's appeal could continue to go through the court system.
Who's when he left this? Is that just a natural process? Like you just do?
Yeah.
Like you just have to? Yeah.
Yeah. He still had lawyers, so they were appealing it for him. But yeah, I don't know why. You know, he didn't seem to really care one way or the other. So maybe it's just it seemed, and it's such a shorter process now than it is now, but still had to go through the system.
Right.
When he left the chamber, reporters were outside and asked him how he had spent the past 12 hours preparing to die. Hassell told them that he slept like a log, ate a hearty meal, and had spent time reading the New Testament. He then said that all women needed to read the 11th chapter of Corinthians because it, quote, dealt with bobbed hair and such things.
Cool, dude. Great. Wow. Just when we were starting to get a little bit of a crack of an insight into you, you pull out Corinthians bobbed hair advice.
I got stuck in the newspaper archives on this story, and between the weird shit that he came up with and the other fascinating articles surrounding his stories, I was like, I could have just, it's crazy, you know, like
it's really out there.
100 years ago, sort of what people were talking about and the ads and yeah, telling ladies to go read the Bible to know what to do with their bobbed hair, like so gross.
Parting words.
So on February 10th, 1928, at 12:29 a.m., George Hassell was put to death in the electric chair at Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. He was said to be smiling and calm to the very end, and his final words were that he was prepared to meet his maker. It took 3 jolts of electricity to end his life. When no one collected his remains, he was buried in the prison cemetery.
No big surprise.
Yep. And I tried to find out what his last meal was and could not find it.
Oh, I know. Dying to know.
Me too.
I mean, back then, you probably had like 4 options.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Steak.
Fried chicken.
Fried chicken. Yeah, I'm going to guess fried chicken. Texas. Maybe steak.
Yeah.
Steak and potatoes.
And that's the story of George Jefferson Hassell, man.
Good lordy, man, oh man. What a ding-a-ling. What a terrible, terrible. Ugh. Old-timey act stuff, like Lizzie Borden. I think that's why she's so scary. That whole story is so scary because it's such a mood too.
Yes.
You know, farmhouse axe murder shit is such a mood.
Yes, ball peen hammers. No.
Yes, no, it's so sinister. It's so eerie and evil and awful. And then for him to be just such a fucking wild card of a weird dude. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, it reminds me of the other case. Pretty sure it's still unsolved. The family that was murdered in the barn. Yeah.
The German case that everybody's covered. Yeah, it's so creepy. It's just captivating.
Yes.
It grabs your brain and doesn't let it go because you're just like, what were they doing? What happened?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And just, the whole thing. To imagine him going room to room and killing 7 people in one night.
Methodically. Yeah. Yep.
So
and then to have some of them have awareness of what was happening to their family.
Yeah. Yep.
That's not cool.
No. Well, there's some nightmare fuel for everyone.
Thanks, listeners. Thanks for that. Thanks for taking us there. Gah, good one. Terrible. Well done.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
Bye.